There is a place down the alley, not unlike a puppet theater, if such a theater was halfway through digesting a library. It'd be easy to mistake it for abandoned ruins, just one among many in a city that's haunted by the ghost of better days. Especially given the way that its scrolls and its old ribbon-bound books are stacked seemingly haphazardly, even outside on the pavement, in the corners of its stage. But the signs of life, or at least of residence, are there in ways both overt and subtle. It is paradoxically clean despite the mess. No dust on the covers of its various manuscripts, the paper windows are neatly patched. The paint clearly refreshed in certain well-worn corners, and the small courtyard and shrine kept clean of grime. The trailing smoke of the shrine's burning incense reaches out to the streets, and by its meandering tendrils is a slovenly form in the shadows of twilight drawn to its doorsteps. A bell rings from within, its light brassy notes held in the air for longer than seems natural. The proprietor is in. The shuffling form that makes its way to the ornate desk before the stage is that of a man shivering beneath layers upon layers of clothing, despite the tepid early autumn warmth. His steps are faltering, and he seats himself before the proprietor with a glazed, distracted look upon a haggard and unkempt face. His hands fiddle with wooden rosaries dirty with age and unanswered prayers, and his eyes dart unsteadily to everywhere, but anything that might also be able to look back. In contrast, the proprietor's silks, furs, and showy colored linen are that of a man that wants the attention that's naturally drawn to him. His gestures, even subconsciously, are just a little theatrical. The way he draws in the smoke of the tobacco pipe, the misty swirls of its vapor, and the unspoken rhythm in the way that he holds in his breath, then breathes out in a way. Shrouding the room's lamplights in haze are too perfect not to be practiced, and too practiced to be deliberate anymore. Half an afterthought as his gaze pacily settles upon the client before him. You understand the price? Yes, I think, said the client haltingly. You take the stories. In exchange, you're unburdened of its memory. A broken laugh. That is it really that convenient? A hand ambivalently tilts. Sometimes the roots of a story are choking and destructive. Sometimes they're all that holds us together. The man digests this slowly and nods. I accept the price. A scroll unfurls. I was working out of Hong Kong at the time, living out of the chunky mansions and hawking gray market electronics for my uncle. And the thing about the mansions was it had some remnants of that old Hong Kong, so to speak. The complex was a short walk away from Kowloon Park, where the old squatter's paradise was before the city administration tore it down, like an offshoot colony of the long-dead walled city. It had some of that old flavor, that of a shady ramshackle heap, barely stitched together by the coinciding interests of its inhabitants. The dozens of hostels and apartments were owned by different squabbling families or groups, each of them dragging exposed wiring across walls and ceilings and dumping their refuse into the empty lot next door. The exposed concrete and bricks and cheap aluminum storefronts down at the lower levels made for a lively and seedy den. For a young man like I was at the time, it was a lawless heaven. The cops were careful about how they intruded in the mansions. It was a nexus of foreign traffic and trade from all corners of the world, and it wasn't worth their pay to trigger an international incident with the Nigerians, the Dutch, or even doubt on their luck American backpackers trying to scrounge dollars while waiting for their visas to get processed at their embassy. It was a romantic misadventure if you were a young kid straight out of Taiwanese conscription, diving into the underworld like an eager moron after growing up on tales of your uncle's exploits in the streets. I didn't question why my uncle would have me run his business while he stayed back in Kaohsiung. I just knew that his name opened doors in places I wouldn't have gone into otherwise, so surely he was a great man in the underworld, and had weight and leverage as his direct agent. And I did, up to a point, though it took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that what was in their eyes was a different sort of terror than that of a gangster and his victims. It was an incident near the Indian convenience store. A religious organization had taken root in the mansions next to them. I thought it was just one of the occasional persecuted groups that had drifted from Shenzhen, but the way that the locals were giving them the cold shoulder, they apparently had an older reputation than that. But I didn't know it at the time. All I saw was that young girl, a priestess in a veil, was getting harassed by the local drunkards. Now, I wasn't one to play some starry-eyed hero not given the company I kept, but the way that they were carrying on seemed unusually brutal. The sort of timber in their threats and retorts that advertised the level of violence we deliberately kept out of the way of tourists. And this was my turf, so to speak, or my uncle's turf, by I ran it. I clapped a firm hand on the shoulder of one of the belligerents, scowling with detached arrogance, only, to my surprise, to be the one yelled at next. Kid! Your uncle should have warned you about them, said an old man known for selling forged IDs to teenagers, as his friends shook their fists at me. He should have told you to kick them out on sight. The only thing I have been told is to hold out this territory and keep the peace, I retorted, and the way that the blood drained from their faces should have clued me in that something was amiss. That's impossible. There's no way you don't know. The deal he made. His companion interrupted him, muttering apologies as they stumbled away. I muttered confusion to myself, then turned to the priestess, who was groping around on the ground for the cruelly smashed remnants of her possessions. The veil, it appeared, wasn't just out of religious decorum. She was blind, pale-pupiled eyes peering blankly out where the veil would occasionally flutter aside. I leaned down, said I was here to help, and carefully picked up the torn books and shredded scrolls. You should probably relocate as soon as you can, I said to her once it was all done. I don't know what your sect did to piss off the locals, but... She shook her head fiercely and falteringly responded. Matron Lin, my master said we would go through trials and tribulations. Yeah, I snorted. I guess that's life in general. Here, look, is there anybody else that can mind the story with? Especially when it gets late. This isn't exactly the safest part of town. No, the others on a spiritual retreat, she said quietly. They say they will be back next month. I took pity on her then. How could I have done otherwise? And youthful, guileless fool as I was, I left the matter at that. So for that month, I watched over her. I got into more fights with my local contacts than I had the entire past 2 years, as if they were trying to keep my shadow out of their doorsteps too, with my new affiliation. Afraid of me as if I was contagious. And I was infected, in a way. A young, arrogant man, a pretty and vulnerable girl, and a lot of time in each other's company. She played a soul-stirring kuchin, both as part of her religious service and out of her own passion, and I was inclined to take my moments away from business to listen to it. My presence, I assumed, was a comfort to her as well. I might not have been interested in her half-hearted preachings, but I was interested in her, and that timid calmness around her at such contrast with my usual company. And my presence and reputation drove off scarier men. In retrospect, I was the one seduced, wasn't I? I did read the literature, if only to save face with her. Some nonsense twist on Taoism, mystic Buddhism, and folk faiths. A lot of emphasis on vision, on storytelling, on the balancing of cosmic and mundane depths. They spoke of an inner eye, of a way to see past the veil of samsara, and how the material world can blind you to clear choices of wu wei. There were rituals in some of the older-looking books, nasty bits of self-flagellation and prayer to cleanse the soul, and ancient-bound volumes of esoteric herbal remedies. I didn't pay them much mind until things got sour with a debtor. She showed up at my doorstep that weekend. I cajoled her into having dinner with me, though by the time she arrived, I was in no condition to play host. I was at the kitchen, certainly, though the meeting prep was my own. I didn't hear her gentle knocking, or the door clicking open with the key I lent her, engrossed as I was with my own grunting and groaning as I tightened the sutures over a shoulder gash. "What happened?" she asked quietly, suddenly by my side. I gave a start, then laughed painfully. What you just did. Somebody snuck up behind me. Damn near got me in the neck before I felt him breathe. Here, sit down, I said to her, my uninjured arm leading her to a chair by the kitchen table. Sorry, do you mind if we order delivery tonight? She was silent for a moment, then told me to wait for her to come back later that night. I was trying to eat a plateful of steamed dumplings with my offhand when she finally made it back, guide cane in one hand and a clay pot in another. It was pungent, even from a distance, a familiar enough smell if you've ever been in a traditional apothecary. Please, she said simply, putting the still warm pot in my lap. I grumbled. I grew up with my evil-humored grandfather laughing uproariously whenever I was forced to drink down whatever foul concoction was supposed to make me healthy or balance my chi. I'll heal this just fine. This isn't anything new. You're lying, she said, quietly but firmly. You had no issues at all until I entered your life. You get along with people, even, and especially the seediest of them. But now they're turning on you because of my people. Because of me. A small hand gently folded itself into mine. I can't do much on my own, but please let me at least do this much for you. I obliged her, and it did dull the ache, warmed my core, and she was gentle with me, fingers tracing over my face as she took my wet cloth, cleaned my wounds, and comforted me in other ways too. I don't know if I was dreaming it, but I felt her whispering what seemed like prayers, fingertips slightly brushing over my brow in the dead of night. At one point, it didn't feel like fingertips, like needles instead, their tips just barely making contact. But at that point, I was too drowsy to protest her light scratches. The rest of that week was nerve-wracking. I felt light sensitive. Like when you're recovering from a bad hangover, and the daylight itself was a searing dagger through your face. The pain would come and go, but it would especially come in tandem with some of the harder parts of my job. Shadows seemed sharper, especially in the more dangerous parts of town, and none more so than the shadows on people's faces. The lines on the ones that were deeper in the workings of the underworld in particular, they seemed older, more aged than I remember them just days ago. The ones that have a reason to beef with me in particular, they seemed feral, bloodshot at first glance, though if I tried to stare for a more certain look, whatever impressions of it faded, leaving me feeling uncertain if I'd seen anything at all. But then some of the fools tried to ambush me, tried to attack me in the corridors of my own apartment. I could see their intent even before they acted. I could see the red gleam dance across the whites of their eyes, the frightening way their pupils dilated black, as if sizing up raw meat. I saw long before the knife flashed out of a roll of newspaper, and I still saw it as I parried it, dashing the man's knuckles against my doorknob with a sickening crunch. When all that was left was the groanings of the defeated, I saw the blood-curdling fright in their own faces as they beheld me. And the reflection of the eyes of the man I was throttling, the unrecognizable abyss in my own. It was time to leave Hong Kong, perhaps for good. She knew, I think, before I even decided to tell her. That last time in the mansions, as I listened to her play, the Guqin sang slow and mournfully. It was hard to find the words. They caught in my throat as I watched her, entranced by the way her long lashes fluttered in between movements. Finally, her piece ended, and so did the spell over me. I'm leaving soon. Back to Taiwan, I said simply. I don't know when I'll be back. A dust cloth muted the vibrating strings. Her silence was heavy and awkward. She finally turned to me, pawing for my arm, feeling my face for my expression. Give me your hand, she said, barely audible above the market noise around us. I opened my palm, her nails traced down from fingertip to wrist, grasping me tightly as if afraid to let go. And suddenly she was up and gone. Her cane's tapping fading into the soundscape around us, and for the first time in a while, I was alone. I remember shivering. I'd grown accustomed to her touch, her warm presence, the way that I knew she was looking for me, even without eyes to recognize me. My other relations up to this point had been less innocent, more mutually pragmatic, that we were both getting something out of it, if only sex and prestige. I didn't realize how deeply this one had sank into me, and now all I had left was a jade charm in my hand, the warmth of her touch, steadily fading from its red tassels and wooden beads. It was still in hand when the ferry settled in Taichung, my uncle's driver in the harbor's parking lot awaiting my arrival. The thing about my uncle is, he might be the most unnaturally successful businessman I've ever known. He had built a frankly unbelievable network of influence throughout the civil sphere, and especially in the areas around the strait. It wasn't all underhanded businesses either. His contacts, his affiliates, they came from all walks of life, from the lowest beggar to the most rarefied area in politics, though, of course, that latter was the minimum necessary requirement to be operating at his level in China. But what made him a standout, what made him scary, was vision. He's constantly under investigation for insider trading. He's certainly guilty of it. He didn't send me into the heart of Asiatic business just to run merchandise. But he had the vision to see where the investigators and their superiors could be convinced otherwise. He had the vision to see almost before it happens, when a warehouse inspector or security guard would fall under horse gambling debt. He had a very particular talent in recognizing the weak points in the world of finance and capital, especially if it involved the follies of human beings. In my youth, I worshipped the man. I wanted to follow in his stead. Show that I had the temerity and the sheer ruthlessness to achieve even a fraction of his legendary deeds and accomplishments, where the scars and the fact of my survival at least proved that I could run the streets he did. Well, it was hard to tell how he looked at me when I finally met him face to face in his Kaohsiung office that evening. We met increasingly rarely over the years, and a life of hedonism and nighttime clandestine operations had taken a toll on an already heavy-set man. His eyes, too, that he was so proud of, the skin was cracked around the edges of the opaque Ray-Bans he now constantly wore. "I'm happy to see you in good health, Uncle," I lied politely. "Huh. It's a good thing I didn't send you to medical school," he grunted, looking over his correspondences. "Kid, sit down. Have a drink. I'm not upset at you, if you're wondering." "Yeah?" I popped open the decanter, poured myself a careful thimble of strong sorghum spirits. Good. Hey. Why didn't you warn me about that cult?" His pen clacked to a stop on the desk. A moment of silence passed as he drank. "I never told you much about growing up in Kowloon, right?" asked my uncle, drumming his fingers on the broad oaken surface. "Long before it got torn down. You mentioned it once or twice." He pulled out his own decanter in amber western liquor and poured himself a shot. "Cults, gangsters, undocumented refugees, you know how it goes, right? No law to protect you, only those who you can ally with." He knocked it back, wincing. "So I chose allies with the scariest bastards in the walled city. Not the richest, not the ones with the most influence on Hong Kong. The ones that they were afraid of." He motioned his shot glass at me, and we both refreshed our drinks. "The watchful mother sect. I'm sure by now you know they were in possession of a few interesting secrets." I nodded. It was common knowledge that they were on the run from the CCP. A lot of religious groups were, but rumor was that they were cooped up in the walled city specifically because the mainland government was treating it as a way to safely jail them, to minimize their influence by trapping in no man's land. Obviously, they wanted out, and I wanted to get rich. So you made a deal," I followed, coughing slightly. The spirit, sharp and medicated, burned harshly going down. It wasn't my usual drink of choice, though I'd basically drink anything given to me back then. My uncle laughed, and I was a hero for it. I paved the route out for them, through deceit, bribery, strong-armed manipulation, the usual. The walled city loved me for it, the brothels gave me free reign, and I got to keep the sect's gifts, too. A way to see the world, to get under its skin in the most profitable way. At that point, a dreadful feeling oozed over me. The jade was hot in my hand, even as my hands and chest felt wrapped in the numbing cold fire. They care a lot about depths. If they are that powerful, a simple smuggling operation. "Yeah, sorry, kid." He gave me a wry grin, waving at his face. "Bills come due. And now you know why I'm openly telling you a lifelong secret. The floor came up to greet me quite suddenly. I had two options, he said casually, his chair creaking as he got up. I couldn't see what he was doing, but the cold sound of a knife flicking open was unmistakable. I was gasping for air myself, trying to take back possession of my faculties, even as my head swam with colors. I could either give back these eyes, which happens automatically as it turns out, and I assure you, very painfully. Or I could help them consecrate a fresh sacrifice to their mother. The drug was paralytic and possibly hallucinogenic. My skin crawled. Whispers haunted me from every angle. I saw faces, eyes, on every reflective surface. You were marked twice, yes? By the pure blood of a priestess, inside and out. I heard your assigned whore treated you quite well. My hands clutched at the jade pendant desperately. It was the only point of contact that didn't waver, melt, or lose its reality. Yet to my dawning realization, something else was touching it too. Why me? I croaked out. It had to be. It had to be somebody of my own blood, I'm afraid. And you were so eager to help me, even against your parents' wishes. I saw her face through that drugged haze. I saw her eyes. And they saw me too. Coldly. Dispassionately. Divinely. They saw me too. If there were any other way, well, it's too late to speculate. He wrestled me back into my seat, clasped a hand on my shoulders, and brushed my cheek with his knife. I'll try to make it quick. You fucking backstabber! I roared, and lunged, knocking the knife aside. Clawed fingers reached out, nails digging in. Through my uncle's eyes. Through my lover's eyes. Through a goddess's eyes. Red. Meat. Hate. We wrestled. We fought. In my drugged, confused state, it was hard to see or feel where my own body has began and ended, so I used the one weapon I did still have some semblance of control over. I bit down. I chewed. I swallowed. I wonder now if that was still part of somebody's plan. To settle a debt, to permanently remove a troublesome, dangerous liaison who's been untouchable for some years. I can see the connections now. I suggest such a fate. Literally see them among many others. The tendrils and the many-eyed maws and that which lurks in the shadows and those that follow patiently behind. I can see, I think, far more than he ever did. I see too much. I see nothing else. I see no way out. The smoke settled upon the parchment and flowing, inky script. The last of the haze faded from the theater, leaving a man blinking in confusion. He was wearing a faded, button-down short-sleeved shirt, and light khakis as appropriate for the weather. He raised a finger as if to say something, but found himself lost for words. As for novels in Braille, you're in luck, said the proprietor, picking up from an ongoing conversation a stack of hardbacks in hand as he appeared behind the man. Your woman, you say she enjoys crime thrillers, especially gangster fiction. How unusual. I only have a small selection of options for her, but I believe they will suffice. Yes, thank you, said the man, blinking back into the present moment. About payment. Oh, don't you recall? You've already paid me in advance, said the proprietor pleasantly. But sir, your next appointment? Oh, yes, of course. The gates to the establishment closed behind the man slowly as he rejoined his lover, her face hidden behind a wide-brimmed white hat. A smile was on her lips, bright and soft. The proprietor waved at her, a gleam of shining green in his hands, a jade talisman swaying before his palms, lowering to his grinning mouth, scarlet tongue, and perfect teeth. The doors clicked shut.